Let's take a look at the covalent bond that is formed to make water. Water is H2O, so it has two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. And covalent bonds are present between the hydrogens and the oxygen. So here's how it's written. The structural formula is written as OHH, and these are single bonds. So let's draw the oxygen. Oxygen, as we know, has 8 protons and 8 neutrons. It should have 8 electrons. So you will have 2 electrons on the inner shell and the remaining 6 in the outer shell. We need to fill this outer shell, and so electrons are shared with hydrogens, the 2 hydrogen atoms, in order to fill the shell. So let's draw the hydrogen. You have 1 proton in hydrogen. It comes real close to the oxygen atom and shares its electron with oxygen. So there's the electron that it shares with oxygen. The same thing happens with the other hydrogen atom as well. Your 1 proton and the electron shell, and there's the electron. Here we have a covalent bond between the hydrogen and the oxygen. However, the oxygen being much bigger than the hydrogen, it tends to pull those electrons towards itself. So the oxygen, because it pulls the electrons towards itself, it becomes a little bit negative, partially negative. The hydrogen gives up its electron a little bit towards the oxygen, and so it becomes partially positive. So that little sign that you see there is partial positive charge and partial negative charge. So that's why we say that water is a polar molecule, and because it has a positive end and a negative end, and the electrons are shared unequally. And this type of bond is called a polar covalent bond because electrons are shared unequally. Since water is a polar molecule, it is a great solvent. It allows salts such as sodium chloride to dissolve. So how does that happen? Sodium and chloride break up into sodium ions and chloride ions, and water molecules surround them in an interesting way. The oxygen part of the water molecule, which is partially negative, tends to face the sodium. On the other hand, the chloride ion is surrounded by water molecules on the hydrogen side. The hydrogen atoms are partially positively charged, and so they face the chloride ion. In this way, the salt dissolves in water. Let's take a look at the arrangement of water molecules and the bonds that are formed between the water molecules. What holds the water molecules together? So here we have 3 water molecules with their oxygens and their hydrogen atoms. The covalent bonds are formed within the water molecule. That's what makes the water molecule, between the oxygen and the hydrogen. And between the water molecules, hydrogen bonds are formed. It is a bond between hydrogen and oxygen. So in each case, we see that there is a bond between hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen bonds are weak bonds. They break when the temperature increases. So within the water molecule, we have covalent bonds, and between water molecules, we have hydrogen bonds.